And in today's Galatians reading, we're looking at life that's lived by the Spirit. And I love the end of this part of chapter 5. I'm sure you'll have heard of it before. It talks about the fruit of the Spirit. And Paul says the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. These are things that we will find ourselves doing naturally if we live by the power and the freedom of God's Spirit. Now we learn a bit more about what that means in today's gospel reading. It's another story that many of you will have heard of, the parable of the lost son. Now in this story, the younger brother decides freedom means claiming his inheritance early and going off and having a great time. But a couple of months in, he realises that when all his friends have left him because his money's gone, that maybe this wasn't the best kind of freedom. And in verse 17 of chapter 15, it says, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here am I, starving to death? I will set out and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he went home, but his father never treated him like a hired servant. In fact, his father gifted him a ring and held him a party and welcomed him home, because freedom in our faith isn't being God's slave, it's being God's son or God's daughter. Now, to think about being lost and being found today and how living life in the Spirit helps us to go in the right direction, we're making a maze. So, step 1. Put double-sided tape on the corner flaps of your A4 piece of card and stick the corner flaps to the sides. So here's my A4 piece of card, and you'll have seen that I've started the next bit of step 1 on it in pencil if you're very, very eager-eyed. But I'm going to start by just putting some of the double-sided tape from my craft kit on these corners. Now, if you don't have double-sided tape, you can use normal sellotape. You can use like a Pritt stick. And if you haven't got a craft kit, literally all I did was used a ruler to draw around the 4 edges, and then just where those corners were, I just made a snip. And it's just a really easy way of making a shallow tray. So here we go. That's 1 stuck on. Oh, that one's being a bit stubborn. There we go. 2 stuck on. 3 stuck on. 4 stuck on. So here's my shallow tray, and inside this I'm going to finish step 1 off by using a pencil to draw a simple maze design. Now I'm obviously using a pen here so you can see what I'm doing, and I have cheated a little bit by coming up with a design before the video. Now I got my ideas off Google, so if you're not confident on drawing your own maze, you could do just the same thing and Google an idea or look in a book at home if you've got some mazes at home already, and you might get some inspiration. But I'm just drawing out the lines that I've already sketched just to save some time. Okay, so nearly there. Okay, now obviously if I put my marble or my bead in at this point, it would be really easy to get into the middle of my maze, because these lines won't stop the marble, but that is going to be step 2, so I'm nearly finished. Here we go. So here is where we start the maze, and at the start of the maze we're lost and we've got to get home, which is in the middle of the maze. Now you might want to draw some pictures rather than writing lost and home. You might just write start and finished. That's step 1 done. Step 2, I've given you these maze walls, And we're going to, if you haven't got a craft kit, again, all I've done is I've got a strip of paper. I folded it in half and then folded those halves in half again. And then I'm going to put some double-sided tape on here to make a maze wall. Now, my first job here is to cut these bits of wall out to the right length. And then I'm going to use my double-sided tape to stick them in place. So here we go. This is the first one. There we go. And I'm just going to keep going until my maze is complete. Now, there we go, there's the second one. Now again, you could use sellotape, you could use Pritt stick. I'm just lifting the corner of the old wall to stick the last wall to stick the new one in where they overlap. Here we go. Next one. So you don't have to cover the whole of the surface area, just a good chunk of it with the double-sided tape. Here we go. One done. So you can see I'm just measuring simply with my finger. I might measure a couple this time. There we go. And sticking with the tape to put my maze walls in place. Oh, I'm going to have to rewrite over home, but I can do that later. Now obviously when you finish making your maze, you've got a lot more time than I've got. So you could then decorate it, colour it in, make it look pretty, even stick extra things on it if you would like to. There we go. And if it's not quite accurate on your lines, as long as there's a gap for the ball to get through, then that is fine. Here we go. Too long, but it doesn't really matter. I'll just make this bit a bit further over here. The advantage of these bits being covering the writings, or the lines, if you get them wrong, nobody will ever know because the lines are under the walls. A couple more to go. And then Caitlin, in a minute, I'm going to ask you to be ever so sneaky and get that marble, that bead that's just over at the other end of the table, so I can test this this maze out, because I forgot to grab it earlier. One. I'll do two again this time, I think. First. Okay. 3 more to go and we're finished. So obviously I'm just doing this as quickly as I can for the video, but you can spend a lot longer on yours. You can carry on making yours through the sermon and even this afternoon if you want to. You don't have to do it all in one go. If you find lots of cutting and sticking a bit boring, it doesn't have to be done all at the same time. And you could even test your marble maze out part way through and see how it worked so far. There we go. The last one. So Caitlin, if you don't mind just reaching out and grabbing the marble, or the bead in this case, and we can test out the marble maze. So here we go. I'm lost. Oh, and how am I going to be able to get home again? Here we go. Oh, look, I've got a bit of alteration to do in my maze. There we go. I was lost, but now I am home using my marble maze and being guided by the Spirit.